Welcome to Handy HQ. If you like to build stuff, fix stuff, make stuff, you've arrived at the right channel. Please like and subscribe and hit that notification button. So welcome to my third video. About 20 years ago I got into windsurfing for the first time. I'd just moved to England and I was a little bit bored, and so I looked on eBay and bought an old windsurfing board, and every spare moment I had I was out windsurfing. It was chucking me off and I was back on and back on. And the only challenge was I lived about an hour away from the sea, and as the winter nights drew in, it started to get dark early, and you know, there was no time to windsurf, and I wanted to windsurf. So I thought, you know, I wonder if I could windsurf on land. I'm sure there's something, you know, I could build something like an overgrown skateboard. So I started to look online, and of course I came across all these mountain boards with the four wheels, you know, sort of off-road, on-road sort of wheels. And I thought, oh, that would work. But I thought from my young days skateboarding that skateboards tended to get a speed wobble, and I didn't really feel like coming off. So I carried on looking until I found a guy in Germany. He called himself Mad Mark, and he had put together a two-wheel skateboard, you know, with little mini motor wheels front and back, but only two wheels. So, you know, if it was stopped, it had to lie on its side. It looked a little bit like a snowboard or a wakeboard, and he called it a windscooter. And I thought, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So I started to investigate how on earth he managed to get it to steer, because, you know, with a single wheel at the front, it's a little bit complicated on getting to know how it should steer. So he had posted some pictures, and I never contacted him actually. I just studied his photographs, and eventually, you know, there was a picture from the top where I could see the axle wasn't straight; it was bent. And then I saw that he had two sort of weird bearings, universals, on each side of the wheel, and I worked out that there was some sort of a ball, you know, inside a bush with little three spokes around it to make sure that these two universal joints drove with the front wheel. So I scaled it to, you know, from his photographs, I scaled it and decided to make my own. And I made the frame out of a bit of plywood I had. It was really on a shoestring, and I had an old windsurf wishbone, which was perfect, you know, aluminium. And at that time I didn't have access to an aluminium welder, so I asked a customer of mine, a company that actually built fire engines in the place I lived, John Dennis Coach Works it was called, and after hours one of their welders argon welded my aluminium frame together, and I just used a bit of plywood, I think, you know, sort of 10mm ply for the deck. And the wheels were mini motor wheels. I had to modify the hubs slightly, and the difficult part was the bearings. So we had an agent partner up in Manchester called BKW Instruments, and one of the chaps that worked there, who's actually now the managing director, another Mark actually, I sent him a drawing. I'd made up some technical drawings, and he machined the bearings, these little round stainless steel bearings, on a CNC machine, as well as the POM, you know, polyoxymethylene, I think they're called. It's like a nylon bush, a split bush that went over the top of these bearings. Anyway, he made the two, plus a spare one, and I put it all together after maybe spending a few weeks on it, and I was very excited to get it to go. And I tried to ride it like a skateboard, and of course not so easy. You needed to get a little bit of speed first, and once it was going and the gyro picked up on the wheels, it started to balance itself. So I took it down some hills, and it performed flawlessly. It was amazing. You could actually go down pavements. It didn't even feel it, and you could go as fast as you liked, and no speed wobble. So with that success in mind, I bolted on the mast foot of my windsurfer. It's just basically an 8mm hole through the top of the deck near the front wheel, and I took it to a local airfield, a disused military airfield that was close to where I lived. Of course, put some motorbike gear on, so I had a leather jacket, and I put a harness on to clip onto the sail, and I had some fun, but it wasn't easy, I must say. Mark in Germany was way better at it. He was obviously a very good windsurfer. He could jibe perfectly, and it was quite gusty, so inland the wind is very often not stable. Anyhow, after that I also took it to the beach and rode along some long beaches down in Kent. And I also, in some very high gale force winds at the town I lived, I took it across a park. We had this enormous green park, sort of rolling hills, and I took it out. I guess it was 40 gusting 50 knots, so crazy wind. I mean, if you let it go, it literally tumbled down the park with a sail, and the scooter, although it weighed about 7.5 kilos, it was just like a matchstick, you know, going down the park. But it was all good fun. Ultimately, I then got a little bit bored, and of course it was getting dark. There was never wind when you wanted there to be wind, and I had this little 50cc motor, two-stroke motor, and I thought, well, what happens if we could motorize this thing? It would be quite good because it actually handles very well. You just lean it like a snowboard, you know, or a wakeboard, and it steers. And so the next thing, I spent a bank holiday weekend, which my wife wasn't very happy about. I spent the whole weekend in the garage trying to make this prototype bolt-on motor. So I just made a friction drive on the back wheel, and mounted the motor at the back, just using G-clamps initially, just as a prototype to get it clamped on. No brakes, and an accelerator was just a bicycle brake cable with a bicycle brake lever turned into an accelerator. And on the Monday, at the end of the bank holiday weekend, I proceeded to get on this thing and asked a neighbor of mine to give me a shove to get it going, because I needed sort of to balance. And I then started to accelerate and realized that, yeah, the gearing wasn't really right. I needed to adjust that. But anyhow, there was a 90-degree corner coming out of where I lived, and I managed to go around the corner, but it was not easy to steer because the center of gravity had changed totally with this motor sitting too high, and trying to steer with your ankles was a little bit difficult. So I thought, well, when I get around the corner, I'll just let the accelerator go, and I'll stop and I'll do some further modifications. But so I got around the corner, let the accelerator go, and it didn't stop. So the little carburetor had jammed open, and it had started to accelerate and accelerate and accelerate. And of course, it was very highly geared, so the higher the revs, it was going maybe 30-35 k's an hour. And I thought, well, I'm not jumping off. I'm 30 something. And I don't want any more tar rash. I've had enough, you know, growing up with motorbikes. And so I hung on, and I thought, well, the next 90-degree corner is coming up, and there's no ways in a month of Sundays I'm going to make the next corner. So I saw at the end of the road there was a little driveway to the right going off-road, and I thought, well, if I get off-road, then I'll jump off and it'll be less traumatic. Probably won't damage myself quite as badly. So I managed somehow with this board, like an overgrown motorized skateboard, to get onto this bit of board, and I'm just about to jump off, and then I had to duck for a tree branch, and the next thing, there's a homeless guy walking towards me down this little path, and I thought, crumbs, you know, if I hit this guy, I'm going to take his ankles off. He's sort of with his bottle, and he probably didn't know what on earth this guy was, you know, what is on earth he riding coming towards me. And I managed somehow, you know, the thing was jumping up and down, and I'm probably doing, you know, 30 to 40 kilometers an hour, and totally out of control, no brakes, no nothing. And I managed to get past him, and I jump off, and I hit my knee. My left knee hits the ground very badly. Anyway, the motor's still running. I switch it off, and I pick the front wheel up, and I start to wheel it back home, and my knee, I could start to feel this pain. I thought, oh my goodness. And my neighbor had sort of run out to the end of the road and couldn't find me, and because I'd sort of disappeared into the bush, Anyway, he came looking for me, and I walked back and I said, you know, I've hurt my knee, I'm going to have to put the thing away, and my wife's not very happy with me being in the garage all weekend, so I better go and do my husbandly duty. So I promptly went upstairs, bathed my kid, who was 2 years old at the time, my son, and had dinner. And while I was at dinner, I thought, you know, I thought I'm going to have to go to hospital. My knees and feels like it's in bad shape. So I hadn't told my wife what had happened, but anyway, I told her, listen, I think I'm going to have to go to the hospital. I had a bit of a mishap with the scooter. So she didn't have much sympathy, so I had to drive myself, and I had a manual diesel car. So I used my right foot as a clutch. I took a walking stick with me. Used my right foot as a clutch, and then let the clutch out slowly. First gear, second gear. Went up to the local accident and emergency, which was very busy, and I sat there for 4 hours in excruciating pain, and they wouldn't give me painkillers. And eventually there was some kid sitting in the next to me, and I said to him, I gave him some money to get some Coke bottles out of the vending machine, which he did. And I packed them around my knee to try and get the swelling to go down. And eventually, after hours of waiting, a doctor came with a wheelchair, and he tried to pick me up, and I tell you what, I nearly went through the roof. I was going to box him on the nose. I was in so much pain. Anyway, he did some x-rays, and he came out smiling, and he says, "Yeah, you've broken your kneecap." So my patella had been broken straight in two, and you won't be going home tonight. So I had to spend the night in hospital and inform my wife that I wasn't coming home. And the next day they put me in a cast, did a small operation, and then put me in a cast from my ankle to my hip. And for the next 6 weeks I couldn't drive my car. A colleague had to pick me up for work. But anyway, after a couple of weeks, full cast, I thought, I haven't given up on the scooter. I was still very excited about it. So I went about thinking about, bolting the motor down properly, putting some sort of tiller arm on the back, and then putting some brakes. Brakes do help. So I got a mountain bike disc brake, and then made a little hub for the one side of the wheel to put the mountain bike disc brake. I put a bicycle speedometer actually on it as well at the time, and then with my cast and all, I was back out riding all over the park on this wonderful scooter. So and 20 years later, it's still going. So here's some pictures on the scooter. It's now got hydraulic disc brakes and made a few other little modifications, but otherwise it's still the same scooter. There's my son having a go on the scooter. You can see father like son, he's actually broken his ankle and he's still got a cast on, so he's having a go. I think this is about 10 years ago, so they discovered the scooter in the shed, and him and his mate got it going. So yeah, it's been quite fun. A little bit difficult to balance at the beginning, but once you get it going, then it works quite well. So guys, this is it. This is how it looks today. You can see the little drive. This is a little bit of sandpaper, actually sandpaper belt that is actually just glued on with contact adhesive, and actually the last one lasted about 10 years. So yeah, it doesn't very much. This is the little fuel tank, which is just from an old lawnmower with a little fuel tap. Going to a little carb off a pit bike, and here you can see the hydraulic disc brake, yeah, and the three cables coming up to 3 levers, yeah. So this top one here is the accelerator, the next one down is the brake, and the one at the back here is the kill switch. And it's just as you stand on the bike, or on the scooter at least, this is your accelerator. You use your middle finger here for your brake. I can show it like that, and then if you really need it, you can use the kill switch as well. And this is the steering system. You can see as you lean one way, the wheel goes left or right depending on which way you're leaning. So yeah, that's it. That's just a plywood deck with skateboard sticky pad, you know, the sandpaper you get for skateboards. And this is the clamp on mounting for the motor. It's just actually put on with 6 bolts. Maybe I can show you underneath. Oops. Not so simple. There you go. You can see the, and there you go, the light is better now. And there's the wing nuts and the little, just a plywood on the sides of the wishbone from the old windsurfer. I just riveted some aluminium C-channel and then just used drywall screws to screw the deck onto the base, and that's basically the strength of it. So that's it. There you go. So a lot of people ask me how fast does it go. Well, here's a quick go down the path near where I live. The first go was 42 kilometers an hour, so that's focusing a lot. Second go, I'm sure I can do better than that. So the top speed we have is 51 kilometers an hour. Not sure it'll focus, but anyway. Max speed 51 kilometers an hour. Okay guys, let's give that another go. 51 k's an hour is pretty going on a little scooter, but let's see what it can really do. So one last go and then we'll call it a day. Alright, here we go. This little sucker started. Let's have a look to see what it did. Oh, goodness gracious, have a look at this. 198 kilometers an hour. That's totally bonkers. I think it's time to put it away before I kill myself.